Hi everyone, we have Dana Guarino-Murphey with us today. She is an early childhood special educator who is currently working in an inclusive environment here in Lynchburg, Virginia. Dana, if you could tell us a little bit about your work history.
Well, I'm an early childhood special ed teacher. I've been a special education teacher from the very beginning. I've worked with all ages of children from birth through adulthood, and my real interest and love is working with young children. So for the past, for the past 15, 20 years, I've been an early childhood special ed person.
I know that you started out working in more segregated environments where kids were actually put into a separate school. Now you're working in this inclusion environment. How has your work changed as a result?
It's entirely different, and it's wonderful. It's really a good thing. When I was in my center-based classroom, I had 8 children in my classroom, and we didn't have any really good role models. Everybody was language delayed. Everybody had had delays of their own, and we didn't have any good role models. And now my children are out in the community. They're in 8 different places, 8 different settings. They're in typical childhood settings with typically developing children, and they're doing beautifully, and we're there to support them.
Right. How has your role, obviously when you were working in a segregated environment, it was very clear what your role is, but now in this inclusionary world, what role do you really play?
Well, that's really different too, because in my classroom, I was there with my teaching assistants. We closed the door and we did our own thing. Now we are visitors in somebody else's classroom. And when you go into a situation like that, you have to tread lightly. And you go in and you're looking at not just the child you work with, you're looking at the children overall. There are usually 2 or 3 teachers in that classroom, lots of personalities, lots of politics that you have to juggle. And you just have to be willing to go in there and be very open and very positive and look at all of the children and all of the staff and see how you can support the learning that's going on in that classroom.
How did they treat you as a teacher versus an aide? Is there that feeling sometimes that you're there but you're sort of in the background?
No, it's really not. And I think it depends on which place you go to, where you are. But most of the places that we go to know that we're there to help. There's nothing that they're going to do that I'm not going to do. If I'm working with a child and that child needs to have a diaper changed, I'm going to change a diaper. I've learned the procedures for licensing so that I can do that. And so I'm going to be a full participant in that classroom doing everything that everybody else is doing. And I'm going to work with our children, but I'm also going to work with their children because hopefully their children are interacting with the children that I'm there to support. So you get to work with the group overall.
Right. Is part of your role actually modeling effective strategies in that classroom?
Absolutely. That's really what we do the most of. We're in there to model. We're in there to offer suggestions how they can modify just little things. It might be how a child holds a paintbrush. It might be how you might change the schedule up a little bit so that it's a little bit smoother routine in the course of the day. But simple things that we can offer for them, that we can model for them, and suggestions we can offer. We do a lot with visual cues. We make a lot of picture cards, and I have little rings of picture cards, and we use those with all the children in the classroom. They've all learned what the picture cards mean, and they help us to help the kids who need that kind of support.
That's great. How do you work with the children individually in an inclusive, like let's say you walk into a classroom and there's 3 or 4 individual children in there who have IEPs. They were identified. They have IEP goals and objectives. Are you actually pulling those kids out of the room and working with them sometimes, or is it all, are all of your interventions just in that classroom environment?
Well, it really depends on the child's individual education plan and what their goals are. I try to stay in the classroom most of the time. Most of the children that we work with have delays in social, emotional skills, and also their language skills. And so the place that they learn those skills is typically in that classroom with their peers. So we're there to model with them and to help them, achieve those goals. But there are times that we will pull them out. And so if I'm in the classroom and I have 3 children in there, those children are typically going to be moving from place to place in the classroom. And so I will try to follow one child for a little bit and stay with what they're doing. And when that child moves on to another activity and I see somebody else across the room who's interested in something else, I'm there to kind of support them wherever they are in their learning with whatever's going on in the classroom. And there are times that I will pull a child out, especially if it's a child that we're really working hard with to try to, there's an emerging skill that that child needs a little extra support on. I might pull that child out once a week and we might work really intensively on that skill and then bring them back into the classroom and to see how they generalize that skill when they're back in that classroom.
Do you spend a lot of time encouraging children to engage with other children, like as part of your plan to teach kids social skills so that they can actually have less isolated play, less parallel play? That's right.
Exactly, yes. And most of our children, I was just updating IEPs actually today, and a lot of our children still are at that parallel play stage where they come into our program. Most of the children I'm working with are new to our program right now, and so they come in with very limited play skills. They don't know how to play with the toys, they don't know how to interact with their peers. So our goal is first to teach them how to play with the toys and then to continually refer them to their peers. I want them to observe their peers and see what their peers are doing, and then I want them to be able to model and imitate some of what they see their peers doing. So I'm on the floor with them and I'm constantly modeling and referring them to their peers and saying to the peers, can you help so and so? I see she's trying to put that ball in that toy, but it's not fitting. Do you think you can show her how to do that? And then immediately, those children are right there to help our little guys.
That's great.
It is great.
And whereas when you were in a segregated environment, you were less likely to have the typically developing peers present to be able to make those social interactions.
Exactly. We still did that to some degree when we had our segregated classrooms, but it's very, you're very limited in that situation, especially if you don't have those good role models. And most of the children in those situations are struggling with similar skill areas, so it really is wonderful to have these children. And what happens is just so natural. Children are so accepting, and they're just wonderful teachers. Something that might take me weeks to teach a child, if they see a peer doing it, they learn so much quicker, so much easier to see a child doing that for them.
Now, do you coordinate any of your activities with the related service providers? Like, let's say you have a speech therapist or physical therapist.
Yes, we absolutely do. We have therapists who come into our buildings on a regular basis. We have meeting times, usually on a weekly basis, where we touch base. And we all have cell phones, so even though we're moving around the city, if something comes up, we have a concern right away. We are always in touch with one another, and our goal is always to work together with that classroom staff, with that family, to help the child achieve their goals in a consistent way. What we find is if we all do things the same way over a period of time, the children gain skills much quicker than if we're all trying to do something different. So we try to coordinate how we go about that.
What is your orientation to instruction? Like, we've been talking a lot in our course about child-centered, activity-based, active learning, experiential learning versus more teacher-directed forms of instruction. Do you find that as a special education teacher that when you are in those inclusive environments, you're providing some more teacher-directed types of activities?
We absolutely do that. We try really hard to help that staff understand how important active learning is. And some centers are better at it than others. We have some centers where their staff has had a tremendous amount of training and they really understand how important it is to have materials in children's hands. We have other centers where they're not so active. And we have a whole push across our area here to work with the Virginia statewide initiative to help improve the quality of our child care programs overall. And so as a staff here in Lynchburg City Schools, we're working to support that initiative. We're working as mentors to those programs to help them get the training they need to improve the quality overall. So yes, absolutely.
So you're really pushing a very child-centered form of instruction But when you have a child that has a severe disability, you may take some hand over hand, some more directive types of activities.
Absolutely. And in our, even in the course of the day, most of the children have some kind of small group time that is a little bit more teacher directed. And that's when they learn some new skills. Or maybe they go outside their comfort zone a little bit. If they're a child who loves trains and always wants to choose to play with the trains, well, then that's a time when the teacher can look at what's the interest of the class as a whole and how can I plan an activity to teach a new skill around the interests of the child. So we do have times during the day that are a little bit more teacher directed. They're very short periods of time. And anytime one of our children who has a special need needs that hand-over-hand assistance to participate in the activities, then we're there to do that for them. Because our goal is to help them be able to access that curriculum to the full extent possible. So if they're doing an art project and our little person can't hold on to the glue bottle or needs help to put an art project together, to put things on the paper, then we're there to help them hand over hand do that. Our occupational therapist comes in and does that. Our speech therapist provides services in the classroom. So again, whatever the child is engaged in, we're going to try to meet them where they are and take them to that next step.
What would happen if you were to walk into a classroom that's so teacher directed, so worksheet driven, and it sort of goes against everything we value in early childhood special ed? How do you respond to that kind of an environment? I mean, what's your role in that at that point?
Those are tough situations, and those are situations that we have come across fairly often, not as much as we used to, fortunately, because of the training that is available and people are taking advantage of. But when that happens, we sit down and we try to talk with the staff about how we might have done things. I sit down and plan with them. Well, okay, you want to do a unit this week on bugs. Here's some things I did when I was in my class, and these are some suggestions I can offer to you. Maybe we can bring in the magnifying glasses and we can go out into the yard and we can look for bugs and we can collect them and give them ideas and suggestions of how they could do things that aren't so pen and paper driven, that aren't so teacher driven, and just let them see if they are open to that. And if they are open to it and they see how children respond to that kind of opportunity, that kind of learning activity, a lot of times it makes them think, gee, that worked pretty well. What other suggestions might you have for the next time we're getting ready to play it? So it's very much baby steps.
Yeah, and it sounds like you would have to have time actually designated for that lesson planning, those conversations with those teachers. Do you find that in most inclusive programs that you are given that kind of planning time?
We are here because we have realized from the beginning how important the planning time is. Really, it is critical, because if you're going to work collaboratively with another staff, you have to be there to be part of everything that goes on. You have to be there from the time you start the planning to figure out what materials do we need. If the center doesn't have the materials, we have a wonderful resource library here we can borrow from. What materials do they need that I can bring over to supplement what they already have, so that we can make this the very best it can be for the children and a wonderful experience for the staff as well.
That's great. Let's talk a little bit about disruptive behavior. And I realize that just, all children and all programs will have behavioral problems from time to time. But is there sort of an expectation when you walk into that classroom that they expect you to handle some of those disciplinary issues, especially with the kids who have IEPs?
Well, we try to brainstorm again in our planning sessions about what's happening. What do we think is causing this behavior? And once we kind of come to some ideas about, well, what can we do to try to help that child with that particular behavior that they're experiencing? So once we know what's going on, how we might support the child, we offer lots of suggestions. Again, we use a lot of visuals. We use a lot of, we don't do time out. We really think more time in, because that's really what that child needs. If you remove a child from a situation, they're not really learning how to be a part of that situation. If the child is very emotional and needs a break, we understand that, and we're going to support them in taking the break. But as soon as they can, we're going to bring them right back into that situation, and we're going to support them through that so that they can learn how to behave appropriately in that environment and in that situation. And it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of hands-on time, but it's an important thing to do for kids, and it gives them lifelong problem-solving skills. And that's really our goal, to help them problem solve what it is that's happening and how we can help them come up with a way that they can problem solve that situation so they can be successful.
Now, how long have you actually worked as an inclusion early childhood special educator? It's been a couple of years now?
It's been, I've been here, golly, I've been here since 2003, and I was only in a classroom 1 year. So what is that? That's 7 or 8 years. I guess I've been doing that for, a good 6 or 7 years. Lynchburg City Schools, 2 years ago, actually probably 3 or 4 years ago now, we started an initiative where we really were focused on planning for inclusion. And we spent 2 years planning before we jumped in. And we did that very intensively with the James Madison TTAC staff, and it was a system-wide change project. And once we, established that we were ready to do this, we jumped in with both feet. We hit the ground running, and we're not going to stop. And it's not without its challenges. There are always challenges, but we really look at the challenges as an opportunity to learn and to grow.
Yeah, I know that several years ago you had a reverse inclusion program here. How did that work out for you?
Well, actually, that was one of the years that I taught here in this building, and I had 8 children who had individual education plans, and I had 3 children who were siblings of other children. And in the course of the year, we identified 2 of those children as children who had their own delays. So it didn't work as well as we had hoped it would work. In subsequent years, we did a little bit better with it. We had 8 children, and we had 4 children from the community, and it was a good fit for what we were attempting to do. At that point, we were looking at children who were 5-year-olds and weren't quite ready to go into kindergarten, and we were fortunate at that point to have funds to hold them back a year and to have participation in an inclusive program with those models, and that worked out really well.
That's good. I want to go back to the inclusionary environment. We are driven now by accountability. We're accountable in early intervention, we're accountable in early childhood special education. How do you approach the whole element of documentation, data collection and analysis, and reporting all of that when you're working in a private preschool environment that's inclusive?
Yeah, well, we use the child observation record here. We use the high scope curriculum, and the child observation record is how we monitor our children, and it's basically taking anecdotal notes. So in the course of the time that we're in the classroom with the children, myself, the teaching assistants who work with us, the speech therapists, the OTs, the PTs, we all have a way to take anecdotal notes and to keep notes about how the children are performing. There are times we work with some centers that have been doing this for 18 years with us. It's been a collaborative effort for a long time for 2 or 3 of the centers in our area, and those teachers are trained to take notes. So, they will, if they see something wonderful that they know, they have an individual education plan, what I call an IEP at a glance. So I give them that, and they keep it posted on the inside of a door. They know what the goals are for each of the children in the classroom, and if they see something that really wonderful happened for that child, if they don't have time to write it down, they're going to tell us about it.
Right.
But many times they will actually write the notes and give them to us as part of the documentation that we keep. So we are constantly taking notes, monitoring the progress of the children.
Dana, as we come to a conclusion here, lessons learned. I mean, you've been at this a very long time now, when many other programs have not really gotten into an inclusive orientation. So you've had probably a lot more experience than many people in the profession. In important lessons learned.
Well, I think the most important thing is to have an open mind and to meet the children and the staff wherever they are, and to be very patient. And you can't go in and bowl somebody over. You really have to go in and see where they are and figure out, what can I do to support this staff where they are right now today, and look at taking baby steps to move us toward the next step. We've all got to work together, and having the time to do that is critical. Having the time to do the planning, not just coming in and, and not being seen so much as an expert. I want to come in and be seen as another teacher and somebody who's going to get down and do the dirty work just like everybody else, and that I'm going to contribute to that classroom as a whole. And I'm there for everybody. I'm certainly there for the children who have the individual education plans, but I'm there for everybody and to support the group as a whole. So be very patient. Have a lot of, you have to love what you do. You have to have it in your heart and want to be there, and just enjoy the kids because they're the reason we're there, and they make it so wonderful and so special. And you leave every day thinking, geez, I'm really glad I do what I do.
That's great. Well, thank you very much. This has been wonderful. And we appreciate your time and
Absolutely.
the passion that you bring to your work.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Buck.
Thank you very much.